On today's Locked On Texans podcast, what went wrong offensively and defensively versus the Atlanta Falcons, which led to a 21-19 loss for the Houston Texans.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Texans fans across the world, across the nation, across the city of Houston to a Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your Texans football analyst, John Some Sports Guy Hickman. And of course, joining me as always is your Texans beat reporter, credentialed media member, and Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's official sports book and the official sports book of the Locked On Texans podcast. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. Cody, as we look at the Houston Texans, who struggled offensively throughout the really entire game after putting up 30 in back-to-back, did not put up 20 on Sunday versus the Atlanta Falcons. What went wrong offensively versus Atlanta?
Well, for me, it starts with a theory of mine that I've been talking about since training camp. And to be honest with you, John, listeners and viewers, I'm actually happy that 5 games into the season, this is the first time we're talking about this issue. And that is none of the wide receivers stepping up as wide receiver number one. Now, I do want to preface my statement by saying this first. I do believe had Tank Dell not left the game with a concussion, I do believe he would have been the guy to step up as WR1 because he was starting to put together a very good game. 3 catches for 57 yards, and he was the reason why I believe him and CJ Stroud connected for, I think it was like a 27-yard reception towards the end of the first half when he hit his head down on the ground pretty hard. Is part of the reason why he had to be evaluated for a concussion. But that connection late in the second quarter was part of the reason why the Houston Texans was able to connect on that field goal that had put them up. I believe it was 9-7 entering halftime. But John, when you take a look at the other 2 wide receivers, when you take a look at Nico Collins, a guy who was top 10, I believe I'm not mistaken, top 5 in receiving yards. The Atlanta Falcons did a very good job keeping him in tight coverage, and they kind of made him inefficient on the day for 39 yards with 3 catches. Robert Woods did not have that much of a good day because I looked at this from a standpoint in the second half. Looking at how the way they was defending Nico Collins, rightfully so, and looking at the fact that Tank Dell was out in the second half, I kind of felt that Robert Woods needed to be the guy to step up in the second half to help this offense, to help CJ, but he didn't. As a matter of fact, I think I counted not 1 but 2 drop passes that would have put the Houston Texans in a favorable situation, and I'm not going to put the entire loss on the wide receiving core because, John, I know you probably have a lot to say about this run game, but it's due to the inefficiencies that we are seeing with the Houston Texans rushing attack through these first 5 games. It's part of the reason why every single week it is important for a wide receiver to step up. By the way, shout out to Dalton Schultz, the tight end. We finally saw the Dalton Schultz that we saw over the last couple of years in Dallas, 65 yards on 7 catches. And of course, he had the touchdown that almost won the game for the Texans. But I just think, man, if this wide receiving core gave you just a little bit more, this would have been a dub for the Houston Texans.
When we look at what went wrong offensively, that's a great question because I think that it all started with Bobby Slowick and his negligence to the understanding your run game isn't working. And, I think this goes for the entire season, and we'll probably talk about this later in the week, but there's going to be a tough conversation this week. It has to be of, we got to limit how much we put Dameon Pierce out there on the field. Devin Singletary didn't have a carry versus the Atlanta Falcons. Through the course of 5 weeks, Damian Pierce has 84 carries compared to Devin Singletary's 24. Damian Pierce is rushing 2.9 yards per carry compared to Devin Singletary's 3.5 yards per carry. Um, I don't know who's a better player at this point, but I do know that there are some things that Devin Singletary can do out on the football field that Damian Pierce hasn't shown to be able to do. So I think you gotta look at that, and that really showed against the Atlanta Falcons. Damian Pierce ended the game with 2 good runs for Houston, but majority of the game, especially in the first half, it was frustrating to watch that run game. And with Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard coming back, the offensive line didn't allow us any sack, which is good. 3 weeks in a row now, no sacks.
Yes, sir.
So that's a positive. That's something that didn't go wrong. But I thought there was opportunities for Houston to be better, offensive line to be better run blocking, but they gave, I believe, Damian Pierce opportunities, and those opportunities were not cashed in. Also, the critical point in the game, guys, the Texans go up 12-7. Now, after that, because we're going to look at the defense and we're going to ask ourselves what went wrong with the defense. That's the question. What went wrong with the defense was they didn't get any help from the offense. After Houston goes up 12-7, the fumble that Houston recovered, but Atlanta held the ball for 5 minutes. Then Houston punts the very next drive. Didn't cash in on turnovers, which also is what went wrong. But Houston only held the ball for 41 seconds. Then Atlanta goes and scores a touchdown, 13 plays, 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Houston gets the ball back. They punt, another 3 and out, only held the ball for 1 minute. Then Atlanta goes down and gets a field goal, 9 plays, 4 minutes and 15 seconds. During that stretch of football, the Houston Texans only held the ball for 1 minute and 41 seconds compared to Atlanta's nearly 16 minutes. So I'm looking at an offense that was stale up until the Dalton Schultz touchdown, that were still coming out of halftime, was not able to capitalize on turnovers, did not show the ability to move the ball effectively for 13 of third downs. That's unacceptable, considering Houston was a top 5 team on third downs heading into that game. They were hot the past 2.5 weeks, and allowing Atlanta to have the ball as long as they did, putting that pressure on their defense. Well, by the way, for the most part, I thought the defense did a very good job until they just got broken down and worn out. They was on the field for too much. And Houston offensively did not do a good job of giving that defense a break. They went out there and got you guys 2 crucial turnovers that could have helped. One of them was a very good return by Jalen Petrie, Greg Arnold with the fumble, and that was a perfect opportunity at that moment for Houston to go and put points on the board. They did not. And Atlanta was just staying in the game. Really, offensively, what we saw from Houston in back-to-back weeks, putting up 30, failed to put up 20, they allowed Atlanta to stay in the game because they didn't do their part of the job. And that was frustrating to watch simply because I thought that Bobby Slowick did not allow CJ to go out there and do what we've been seeing from CJ. I thought the run was a force. I thought they forced the run, and I thought that there was opportunity for CJ to just go out there and be the man, but the play calling wasn't there, and that was frustrating to watch as well. 4-13 on third downs compared to what we've seen, that's unacceptable. This is a better defense than what Houston has played, though. Give credit. David Ayamana was a guy I wanted here in Houston. AJ Terrell at corner, which is probably why we didn't hear a lot from Nico Collins. I got to go back and watch some of the tape. But they played a very good defense. I still think there was opportunity for Houston to move the ball if CJ was just in control.
And before moving on, I do want to add this to what went wrong. And once again, it goes back to a theory that a lot of people have been talking about before the season. And that's literally just the lack of playmakers that they have on the offensive side of the ball. And that's something that Coach D'Amico Ryans actually talked about during his post-game press conference following yesterday's game. He said on the offensive side, nobody really made plays when you needed them to make them the most, especially during those back-to-back drives where the Texans committed force 2 takeaways. So, I really do believe that this game on the offensive side of the ball just literally just came down to what the Houston Texans do not have, because I think this was the very first time where the game was close up until the final seconds, up until the final second, because they end up kicking that field goal with 1 second left on the clock. And John, it's just like if they just had that one extra playmaker, whether in a rushing attack or in the wide receiving core, this game would have went completely different for the Houston Texans. And I also believe that's part of the reason why we did not see CJ be the guy that we saw 3 out of the last 4 games.
I definitely want to go back and look at how good of a job did AJ Terrell do on Nico Collins, simply because Dalton Schultz had 10 targets, Tank Dell had 10 targets, and Tank Dell went out at what point of the game?
At halftime, literally.
At halftime. He had 4 targets. Nico Collins ended the game with 4 targets. And Robert Woods had 9 targets. And so what I'm getting at is, for Bobby Slowick and Nico, and CJ, I gotta find a way to get. He's been this team's wide receiver number 1. I'm not calling him an NFL wide receiver number 1, but for Houston, he's been that guy. So you got to find ways to get him involved. You got to find ways to get him the ball. And 4 targets just isn't enough. So I do want to go back and see what did AJ Terrell do? Did he just completely take him out the game? Because I think AJ Terrell is that good. But what happened? Because if not, there was opportunity. There should have been opportunity to get to get Nico involved offensively. But I also think, guys, I'm going to reiterate it. It's time for Houston to look at themselves in the mirror. We want to be a run team. I don't think that's this team. That's not the formula for this team to win. And I also think that they're going to have to look in the mirror and say, we got to get Devin Singletary some more carries. It's just we can't go a game with giving Dameon Pierce, who isn't running the ball well, 20 and not give Devin Singletary none at all. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel lately, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is super easy to use. There's a lot of things you can bet on: spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. So take this device or log in on your computer, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get kicked off and kick off the NFL season right now the proper way, the right way, with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this recap Monday installment of Locked On Texans. We talked about the offense. Now we're going to look at the defense. And what went wrong on the defensive side of the ball? I'm going to just
no pressure.
Oh, God. No pressure. John, I'm going to actually let you take it. But before I do want to say this. If you listen to the crossover episode that we did with our guy, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, I say that was the #1 thing for this Houston Texans defense, because when you go back and rewatch the first 4 games of the season, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, Kenneth Pickett, 3 of the, might as well say 5 quarterbacks, because Anthony Richardson got hurt in the first quarter, and that ended up being Gardner Minshew stepping into the game. But 3 out of the first 5 quarterbacks that the Houston Texans played against, they were either in the game or had a chance to come back and win the game, like the game against the Ravens, or that was part of the reason why they was on that 2-game win streak, because that defensive front did a very good job at putting pressure on the quarterback. John, take it away, because they did not do that against Desmond Ridder and the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah. And the thing is, by the way, Houston did allow Ridder to throw for his first 300-yard performance, but a lot of those yards came at the end of that third quarter and that fourth quarter, where you just saw Houston's defense get worn out. But I do put what went wrong. I don't think Houston did a good job of putting pressure on Desmond Ritter. I saw a lot of undisciplined plays from the edge
Boy,
rushers.
by the
From
way,
the
four
and
offsides approachment that gave up about 15 to 20 yards.
to 20 yards, and I know for sure one of them was crucial. And I'm like, guys, this is Desmond Ritter we're playing here, and no disrespect.
Well, the broadcast said he had a good voice, a powerful voice. Let's keep getting the
Okay,
Texans.
well, you know what? So did Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and I don't think I would have bit on a fake hut. Strong voice, whatever. That was undisciplined. The edge rushers and their contained or lack thereof at times was undisciplined during that game. And I'm gonna say this, and we'll go back to the actual game. I love the advanced stats, the win, the block win rate, whatever. But I need to see more from Will Anderson. But I did think that Will Anderson played good against the run, and Will Anderson in that area reminds me a lot of Jadeveon Clowney. He is going to be effective against the run, but in terms of pressure on a quarterback, it was non-existent on Sunday. I thought that there was times where if I'm Desmond Ritter, I'm looking around to see if I need to check out soon or do I got the extended stay with the hotel because I have this much comfortability in the pocket. And y'all know how y'all feel when y'all be laying in them hotel beds, man. The clean ones, not the one with the bed bugs. But for Houston, they didn't have opportunity to field no bed bugs up in that backfield because the offensive line for Atlanta did a very good job of neutralizing that defensive front. And with that, you also have the edge rushers at times play a little undisciplined. The D tackles didn't do a very good job, I think, for getting after the quarterback. They did a good job against stopping the run. Bijan Robinson and the Atlanta Falcons, one of the best rushing teams in the NFL, failed to reach 100 on the day. So that's an improvement when you look at how much the defensive line and the defensive front seven and the defense as a whole has struggled a little bit versus the run. Proud of the Houston Texans in improving in that area, but they allowed Desmond Ritter to have the game of his life because of the lack of pressure up front. This is a defense that needs that pressure to go out there and really, win a game. And I thought the linebackers didn't do a good job. The loss of Christian Harris actually and Shaquille Griffin. I thought that those were losses that impacted Houston bigger than what I thought that they would. But specifically Christian Harris and the linebacker group, I thought that they took a step back a little bit. They put a lot of pressure on the defense for the lack of the job that they were doing. And for Houston, I understand why they worked out Jason Verrett. The only cornerback that you can really count on was Steven Nelson, who I thought played fairly good. That's going to be tough on any defense to continue to fight through all of those injuries against a position that you need your best guys out on the field. And for Houston, they only had Steven Nelson, and I think that's a big reason why we saw the defense not play as well as they have been playing. But overall, no pressure. No pressure. They were mid the whole game. No pressure at all.
Yeah, I will 100% agree with you, John, and that's where I was going next, man. I just think injuries really took a toll on the Texans on the defensive side of the ball. I wasn't too surprised by the loss of Shaq Griffin, who went down with a hamstring injury during practice. I believe that was during Thursday's practice, if I'm not mistaken, because you was looking at a situation where the Texans were forced to go out there with Kadar Holman, and no disrespect to Kadar Holman, but what we saw is part of the reason why, a matter of fact, the reason why he is your third string corner. And when I saw that Shaq Griffin was inactive for this game, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this was going to be the game that Desmond Ritter get into the groove, because the last two games, matter of fact, this entire season, he has not looked good. And no disrespect to him, I'm actually rooting for the young man, but I just knew that they was going to pick whichever side of the field that Holman was on, and that's basically what we saw. But John, to your point, the loss of Christian Harris, man, the linebacker play did take a step back, despite the fact that Henry T, he did have he did have a really good game with 12 tackles, 6 solo hits, and I hate to say the linebackers took a step back. And I think it had a lot to do more so with the fact that Kyle Pitts finally got into the groove as well. But Blake Cashman, man, he's one of those guys to where you're thankful that the Texans have some type of depth at that position. Linebacking play did take a step back without Christian Harris, like I just mentioned, but Blake Cashman played really well, filling in that void. I do want to mention, and maybe it was just due to Russ, and I understand that he did get credit, I believe, which was for that first fumble, but I need to see more out of Denzel Perryman. Because outside of the first game of the season, yes, I understand he's been hurt, but when you consider the loss of Christian Harris, he should have provided more to that linebacking core.
These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. And you want to be 100% certain that you have the access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Just add your job, and then after adding the job, go ahead and add purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality service and hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster and for free. Just go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. We got to look at more from the Atlanta Falcons game before we close out. And I do think it's great to look at the positives, Cody, before we close out today's game. You look at the Houston Texans defense, they created 2 turnovers. And they created those 2 turnovers in crucial moments. Grayling Arnold created one, and I thought Jalen Petrie did a very good job of returning. And then there was also another fumble as well.
The one made by Denzel Perryman.
By Perriman that was recovered by Houston. So we look at Houston, they only allowed 21 points. And this was an offense that until the third quarter, was it fourth quarter, held this offense to 13 points, 13, 14 points. They did a good job, I think, throughout the game of bending but not breaking. And I go back to talking about what the defense did right or did wrong. You look at the time of possession for Houston, I think Atlanta had the ball for nearly 12 more minutes than the Houston Texans. And it's really showed. The first half, Desmond Ridder only had 127 yards. In the second half, they allowed him to throw for 202 yards. So the 329, you saw the difference, especially when you go back to that 12-7 lead, the sequences that happened right after that. I also, again, for 3 weeks in a row now, 0 sacks for the offensive line. We look at what went wrong. Guys, understand this. Through the first 2 weeks, Cody, CJ was on pace to, break David Carr's record.
That young man had 11 sacks, and I think it's like 19 quarterback hits.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy, but credit where credit is due. The makeshift offensive lines, the figuring out who's going to step in on the fly, having to bring guys in, and they're playing maybe quicker than they wanted to or anticipated, if I'm looking at it from the coaching staff and front office perspective. But for 3 weeks in a row now, 0 sacks allowed. So that's a great thing to hear. And Khalil Davis.
Khalil, he's about to get. We're going to see
Khalil Davis.
We're going to see a roster change this week.
Because I was about to say he's going to be on the Jordan Akins type of train, right? One more time, you got to sign him.
Yeah, and yesterday was his last time. Yesterday was his last time to be called up for the active squad roster. Khalil Davis, man, that's one of my guys in the locker room. That young man has a phenomenal story, basically a story about redemption. He was in the league, then out of the league, and really quick had a son and say he has to turn this around for his son. And that is basically what we have been seeing ever since he came to the Houston Texans. So shout out to Khalil Davis. That is something that a lot of you listeners and viewers should definitely keep your eyes on, because I'm pretty sure at some point, probably as soon as tomorrow, we're going to see some type of roster change to get Khalil Davis to the active 53-man roster, because as he has been called up not one, not two, but 3 times so far this season, and it has shown with the production of that defensive unit.
It has. By the way, I talk about the Houston Texans and not getting no pressure on the quarterback. And guys, excuse me, we're recording this in the morning, so that's why you hear me do a lot of coughing on my voice. But against the run, guys, I mean, there was a play. And I could talk all I want to about Will Anderson not finishing, getting the sacks, right? He does have one of the season, and I do believe that they will come. But there was a play where Will Anderson was on the opposite side. I want to say he was on the left side of the defensive line going against the right tackle, and he squeezed down that line the opposite way, so going towards his left side, and made a play on Bijan Robinson. Tackle for loss. Again, Khalil Davis getting involved with a tackle for loss. Sheldon Rankins got involved with a tackle for loss. When I look at, and these are going, I'm just looking at my first 3 drive notes. For Houston, they made plays. And by the way, Will Anderson getting double teamed 5 games into his career is crazy. As much as he's getting double teamed, I would love to go see that double team rate. But Houston made a point of emphasis to stop the run. And I think that was because they knew that was all Atlanta had. Atlanta did a good job. Arthur Smith and them boys did a good job of proving that they were more than a one-dimensional team, or maybe it was just Houston allowed them to prove it with the opportunities that they allowed. And again, they didn't just blow away Houston offensively. It's a close game. Came down to the wire. Desmond Ridder throwing for 300 yards is crazy. But for Houston to go out there and stop this running team, and they did it in a way where you had a team to get 5 tackles for losses. I thought the D tackles played better against the run. That's what you need to see from this defensive unit, especially the front 4 consistently for the rest of the year. So kudos to those guys for getting it done up front in that manner, stopping the run. Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to continue to watch us throughout the week as we continue to talk Texans each and every day. I'm John Sports Guy Hickman. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. And make sure that you subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And follow me on Bleacher Report, the Bleacher Report app, under the name John Hickman.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.